Such a huge amount of energy? Isn't it enough? Looking at the frog leap formation as it completely absorbed the energy transformed from the mountain peak, and still showing no reaction, Lin Dong was momentarily stunned. He spoke, "I know just how massive the energy from a mountain peak is. If you were to convert a stone weighing hundreds of tons into energy, that energy would likely be equivalent to a full-strength strike from a first-grade supreme. And a mountain peak of 100 zhong would have a mass of at least several million tons. If completely converted into energy, it would be roughly equivalent to a full-strength strike from an Earth Supreme at its peak. Such a colossal amount of energy still wasn't enough to satisfy the teleportation array? If all of that energy had been fully absorbed, it would have been enough to teleport you to the sacred drum Heavenly Sovereign's Relic," Tang Xinlian explained. The more energy the frog leap formation absorbs, the further it can send someone through space. It's like a spring. Energy acts as the pressure, and the more pressure there is, the further it can launch you. That's why it's called the frog leap formation. But there's a major flaw in this formation, one so significant that even a heavenly supreme level spiritual formation master couldn't fix it. The energy absorption efficiency is just too low. The energy from the mountain was immense, but in reality, only less than 0.2% was absorbed. That 0.2% is the white vapor you saw earlier. The remaining 99.8% is the invisible mass energy, and it's rapidly dissipating. No way, only 0.2% was absorbed? Hearing this, the little mink behind Lin Dong was also shocked. So what they're doing is... Lin Dong looked down in surprise at the 100 or so supreme experts who were pulling mountains from the range and continuously feeding them into the teleportation array. With a loud rumble, one mountain after another was converted into energy by the formation. In no time, the entire mountain range was filled with the white vapor of pure energy. When about 500 mountains were fed into the array, noticeable changes finally began to occur in the formation. The array seemed to reverse, or rather, it was reversing previously and was now stabilizing. As the formation stabilized, the space above it seemed to cave in. Almost there. Tang Xinlian observed the dented space and instructed the supreme experts to continue feeding nearly 100 more massive mountains into the array. Buzz. As the last 100 mountains were transformed into pure energy and absorbed by the frog leap formation, the space above the array collapsed into a bottomless black hole. Around the black hole, even light was bending toward it like a waterfall. All right, enter now. Passing through this opening will transport you directly to the blast membrane area, and you will land at the sacred drum Heavenly Sovereign's Relic, Tang Xinlian said. Then the recent matters in the martial realm. I'll have to trouble you in Elder Song with those, Lin Dong said with a smile, glancing at Tang Xinlian. Stop nagging. Just relax. Tang Xinlian responded nonchalantly, giving him a quick glance. Let's go then. Lin Dong waved at Little Yin and the others behind him. His voice just faded as he darted toward the opening of the frog leap formation. Little Yin and the others quickly followed. The 5 figures shot into the formation, and in an instant, everything around them turned white. The intense light overwhelmed their vision, but after about a breath, it began to fade. When Lin Dong and his group slowly opened their eyes, they found themselves in a completely different world. So fast! Little Yin exclaimed in surprise. The speed of the frog leap formation's teleportation was so quick, it was as if they had just walked from one room to another. Meanwhile, Lin Dong, in front of Little Yin, began surveying their surroundings. Lin Dong realized that they were floating in midair above a vast, brownish-yellow plain. The ground stretched endlessly beneath them. When he looked closely, he was astonished again, as the flatness of the terrain was so perfect that not even the smallest mound could be seen. Wait, that's not the ground. Lin Dong quickly noticed the oddity of the massive brownish-yellow surface below. With a swift motion, he shot upwards into the sky. As Lin Dong's figure soared to a height of 100,000 miles in deep space, a magnificent scene before his eyes shook his heart. Indeed, some things could only be clearly seen from a higher vantage point. What appeared to be a brownish-yellow flatland below was not a plain at all. It was a perfect circular plain, and beneath this plain was a supermassive black wall, nearly 100,000 miles high. Only from Lin Dong's current height could the relationship between the circular plane and the massive wall become apparent. It was a gigantic drum with a diameter of several 100,000 miles, its surface covered in strange runes that seemed to form a ceiling formation. At this moment, the giant drum floated above a vast sea stretching across 2 million miles. This sea, in fact, was a massive lake at the center of a continent. The visual impact of this scene left Lin Dong with an immediate impression. Spectacular. There's no mistake. This is the relic of the sacred drum, heavenly sovereign, Lin Dong murmured to himself. He gazed at the endless continent below, beginning to search for the relic of the sacred drum, heavenly sovereign. Generally speaking, powerful beings at the supreme level or above, after their fall, would leave their legacy in some concealed, void space, difficult to find. Only those truly fated would be able to obtain those remnants. Swish, swish. The sound of breaking air came, and little Yin and the others, like Lin Dong, flew into the sky, equally shocked by the grand scene below. What an exaggerated setup. From over 100,000 miles up, little Mink and the others said in astonishment. In their eyes, the size of the continent below was normal. The only abnormality was the giant drum. They couldn't fathom how such a massive object could have been created, or if this drum was the sacred drum, heavenly sovereign's heavenly artifact, the sacred drum. Could the relic of the sacred drum, heavenly sovereign, be inside this giant drum? Big brother, could the relic space of the sacred drum, heavenly sovereign, be inside this giant drum? Little Yin asked. Upon hearing this, Lin Dong nodded and then said, not only that, but I also sense some very unusual fluctuations inside this giant drum. They should be extraterritorial evil clans. There are extraterritorial evil clans inside? Little Yan's expression changed upon hearing Lin Dong's words. Yeah, the sacred drum, heavenly sovereign, was surrounded and killed by powerful members of the extraterritorial evil clan. I believe, at the very end, the sacred drum, heavenly sovereign, must have used some method to seal those evil demons inside this giant drum. Along with him, his legacy was also sealed, including the sacred drum. Do we have to enter the giant drum? How do we get in? Fan Yunzi asked from behind. I'll give it a try, Lin Dong said calmly. His eyes narrowed, and soon he saw the spiritual energy within tens of thousands of miles begin to boil, forming massive tides that rushed toward him. Upon seeing this, Ling Qingzhu and Little Yin quickly retreated a short distance. Whoosh! The vast spiritual energy gathered above Lin Dong's head, where the energy density reached a terrifying level, distorting the surrounding space. Soon, the gathered spiritual energy transformed into a massive beam of spiritual power, which shot downward at an extreme speed, striking the giant drum surface. Boom! The terrifying spiritual beam hit the drum's surface like a gigantic drumstick. The impact was so immense that the drum's surface visibly vibrated. The up and down motion of the drum surface was so rapid that its span reached several hundred zhang, and the ripples created by this vibration made the space within 100,000 miles tremble. The clouds in the sky began to swirl, and the sound of thunder rumbled continuously. Beneath the giant drum, the once calm sea began to rage. Huge waves, over 1,000 zhang tall, spread out from the drum's center, sweeping everything in their path. Some massive spiritual beasts hiding beneath the sea were thrown into the air, and the vast continent surrounding the sea echoed with countless mournful cries filled with murderous intent. Dark clouds covered the sky, the earth trembled, giant waves surged, and spiritual beasts fled in panic. Lin Dong merely struck the giant drum once, and the scene was earth-shattering. Which two plans? Lin Dong asked when he heard the question. If there are other ways besides fighting that heavenly emperor, that would be great. First, let's clarify our two goals. My goal is to destroy that heavenly emperor, and your goal is to obtain the sacred drum technique. The sacred drum, heavenly sovereign, looked at Lin Dong and said, So, to achieve both goals simultaneously, we currently have only two plans. Plan 1 is for you to transfer all of your power to me. Although I am only at the mid-stage Earth Supreme level, with the aid of the sacred drum's power, it should be enough to defeat that heavenly emperor, who has been severely wounded and sealed away for tens of thousands of years. However, after the Heavenly Emperor is destroyed, I will likely dissipate due to the depletion of my remaining power, and the Sacred Drum technique will also vanish. But you still have a chance to obtain the Sacred Drum technique because, during this process, I will certainly use the Sacred Drum's power. If you can observe and comprehend it, both our goals will be considered somewhat successful. In the second plan, would it involve me directly fighting him? Lin Dong asked. Not quite. In that case, even if you have some methods to fight or suppress him during the battle, you would at most be evenly matched with him. But remember, once that guy breaks free of the seal, his first instinct will not be to engage with us, but to escape. Let me ask you, when you and he are evenly matched, do you think you can stop him from running? The Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign asked. I can't stop him, Lin Dong answered without hesitation. He knew very well. After all, this was a Heavenly Emperor, a Heavenly Supreme. Even if his power had dropped to Earth Supreme level, his methods would still be at the Heavenly Supreme level. Lin Dong understood this for another reason. He had been in a similar situation before. Every time he fought opponents of higher levels, he relied on stronger martial arts and divine artifacts. When fighting Nirvana stage experts, he had already used martial arts and divine artifacts of the Death Rebirth realm and even the Wheel-Turning realm. Back in the Heavenly Mystic dimension, he was almost suppressed by the same level alien Demon Emperor, precisely because he had lost the ability to surpass the opponent's level. Of course, in the end, he still succeeded because he obtained the Dimension Embryo. Exactly. Unless you have the overwhelming power to crush that Heavenly Emperor, at least the late-stage Earth Supreme level. The Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign continued. The second plan would be for you to engage him with crushing power. But since it's crushing power, it wouldn't be a fair fight. Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign, may I ask something? Where can I obtain this crushing power? Lin Dong furrowed his brow. If he truly had such power, he wouldn't fear the mid-level Heavenly Emperor. From heaven and earth, the Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign replied. Heaven and earth power? Does that mean the heaven merging stage? Lin Dong asked. Heh, how shallow. The Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign chuckled. The heavens and earth are vast, yet only a few truly understand the profound mysteries of heaven and earth power. He continued, heaven and earth power includes everything in existence, the most common being the spiritual energy that permeates the world. Above that, there is spiritual energy that seeps through space, and all living things, including space itself, are part of the heaven and earth power. The three heavens stage can indeed use heaven and earth power, but at this stage, it's like grabbing a loaf of bread in front of you and eating it, just absorbing it. This is the preliminary use of heaven and earth power. For the supreme stage, this loaf of bread becomes bigger because there is more spiritual energy available in space, known as space power. By using this power, supremes can distort space, and high-level supremes can even shatter space. But they don't know that this is not real space power. If you break space, you'll find that with enough time, it will naturally repair itself. The real space power of heaven and earth is the power that repairs space. Earth Supremes have a more advanced understanding of heaven and earth power compared to the Supreme Stage. While the Supreme Stage only understands the surface, Earth Supremes can mimic, using their spiritual energy to form heaven and earth's creations. This is the true meaning of the image of heaven and earth, which is to imitate heaven and earth. On the basis of imitation, Earth Supremes can further control and regulate heaven and earth power, which is something only a Heavenly Supreme can achieve. A Heavenly Supreme can, with a thought, control the heaven and earth, energy, and space within tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of miles. It's like how people in lower dimensions control the dimension embryo. A Heavenly Supreme becomes like a dimension embryo themselves, but unlike that, they can turn any range into their own domain, which grows with their power. I once saw the leader of the Maha-Divine clan, who could control the heaven and earth for billions of miles, essentially controlling thousands of super lower dimensions. Within this range, they become the heaven and earth, and the heaven and earth become them. They are the laws, and the laws are them. This is the so-called rule power. The true application of the power of heaven and earth is what I refer to as the control over all things in the world. However, this still cannot be considered as truly surpassing heaven and earth. With that, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign finished his explanation. Lin Dong, sitting across from him, was slightly shocked, while the others behind him, including Fin Yunzi, were utterly stunned. It turned out that their understanding of the power of heaven and earth over the years had only skimmed the surface. Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign, what you mentioned about truly surpassing heaven and earth. What kind of realm does that refer to? Could it be the Lesser Sovereign Realm? Lin Dong asked after hearing the explanation. Oh, you know about the Lesser Sovereign Realm? Upon hearing Lin Dong's words, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign's gaze towards him became full of interest. One of my assistants is knowledgeable about all things in heaven and earth, Lin Dong replied. He was referring to Elder Song. The term, Lesser Sovereign Realm, was something he had learned from Elder Song, and he knew it was a realm that surpassed the Heavenly Supreme. Surpassing heaven and earth means going beyond heaven and earth. However, this so-called transcendence is not absolute, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign explained to Lin Dong. For lower dimensions, the boundary point of that dimension is the heaven merging stage. As long as one surpasses the heaven merging stage, they are considered to have transcended the heaven and earth of that lower dimension. Similarly, for a super lower dimension, the boundary point is beneath the Earth Sovereign stage. So, as long as one reaches the Earth Sovereign stage, they surpass the heaven and earth of that super lower dimension. Surpassing heaven and earth refers to reaching or exceeding the dimensional boundary. Then, if one reaches that legendary Lesser Sovereign Realm, does that mean they surpass the heaven and earth of the Great Thousand Worlds? Lin Dong asked. That, I don't know, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign replied. My era is far removed from yours. In my time, there were 10 super powerful beings in the Great Thousand World. Among the top 3, there were those who truly reached the Lesser Sovereign Realm. As to whether they had already transcended heaven and earth, only they would know. I roughly understand what you mean, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign. If I am not mistaken, the second method you mentioned is for me to use the true power of heaven and earth to fight against the sealed Heavenly Emperor, Lin Dong said. Hee, you're quite perceptive, young one. Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign smiled at Lin Dong. However, I am only an Earth Supreme, and the control over heaven and earth is a power only the Heavenly Supreme possesses, Lin Dong continued. He didn't know how Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign planned to make him wield such a supreme power. But if he could control it, there would be no need to fear the Heavenly Emperor. However, Lin Dong seemed to think of something. That Heavenly Emperor was once a terrifying existence comparable to the mid-Heavenly Supreme. Wouldn't he be able to control the power of heaven and earth like us? Don't worry about that. He cannot control it, unless he is their demon ancestor. Even a higher-ranked Heavenly Emperor would have difficulty mastering the power of heaven and earth in the Great Thousand World, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign assured him. You should know that the Great Thousand World, lower dimensional worlds, and extraterritorial worlds are clearly divided. Each world has its own kind of power. The lower dimensions have many types of power because there are so many of them. The Great Thousand World only has spiritual energy, while the extraterritorial worlds only have evil demon power. But there is one unbreakable rule across all 3 worlds. In order to control the heaven and earth of a world, one must use the power of that world. The evil clans from the extraterritorial realms do not cultivate spiritual energy. If they try to forcefully control the heaven and earth of the Great Thousand World, not only will they fail, but they will also suffer backlash. Similarly, Heavenly Supreme experts from the Great Thousand World cannot control the heaven and earth of the extraterritorial worlds. However, there is another iron rule here. The stronger ones in the Great Thousand World, even though they do not cultivate the powers of lower dimensions, can still control the heaven and earth of the lower dimensions. Spiritual energy is superior to any other power in the lower dimensions. Therefore, only the power of lower dimensions is assimilated into the spiritual energy of the Great Thousand World. But I've never heard of spiritual energy from the Great Thousand World needing to be assimilated into another power in a lower dimension. The evil demon power from the extraterritorial evil clans cannot be assimilated into the Great Thousand World because it is of the same level as spiritual energy. However, just because the evil demon power is on the same level as spiritual energy doesn't mean it can replace spiritual energy to control the heaven and earth of the Great Thousand World. Unless they have the ability to replace all the spiritual energy of the Great Thousand World with evil demon power and let the Great Thousand World be eroded by this power for millions of years, then the Great Thousand World would become another extraterritorial world, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign said. I once thought, could this be the purpose of the extraterritorial evil clan's invasion of the Great Thousand World and lower dimensional worlds? If they succeed, there would be no place for us to stand in the three worlds. Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign, the objective of the extraterritorial evil clan is not so simple. However, to Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign's surprise, Lin Dong immediately rejected his assumption. Lin Dong then shared with Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign some of the information he had learned from Qingyan Qian on the Auction continent, including the fact that the spatial shackles would become even stronger and more advanced as the spatial worlds expanded, and that the extraterritorial evil clan intended to fuse the three major worlds in a terrifying plan. This is too exaggerated, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign exclaimed, his first reaction one of sheer shock. Compared to Lin Dong's account, his own guess had seemed like a child's play. Yes, if that is the case, they wouldn't even need to pollute the spiritual energy of the Great Thousand World. As long as they merge a world bigger than the Great Thousand World, their use of evil demon power would naturally become more advanced. In such a situation, there would be no need for corrosion. The spiritual energy of the Great Thousand World, being of a lower grade than the evil demon power, would inevitably be completely assimilated into the same evil demon power. Those of us who have experienced spiritual energy assimilation know that this process is unstoppable. These evil clan beasts, they are truly beyond reason. Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign muttered, then sighed helplessly. Not long from now, I will completely dissipate into the heavens and earth. The future of the Great Thousand World will have to rest in your hands. Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign, you sacrificed yourself to protect the heavens and earth. This spirit will be passed down by our generation and raised to an even higher level, Lin Dong said, cupping his hands in respect. In the past, people viewed the extraterritorial evil clan with a defensive attitude. As long as they didn't attack us, we certainly wouldn't take the initiative against them. And what is the strategy now? Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign asked. Take the initiative. I heard something in the words of Senior Qingyan Qian at the Great Thousand Assembly. Although he didn't state it directly, I suspect their goal is not simply to defeat the extraterritorial evil clan. Perhaps their plan is to eradicate the extraterritorial evil clan entirely. I even boldly speculate that they will use the same method as the evil clan to fuse and assimilate the extraterritorial worlds, completely uprooting them. If that can be done, it would be great, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign said. No more talking. I've already told you the two methods. Which one do you think is best? Upon hearing this, Lin Dong fell into deep thought. Of the two methods Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign had just proposed, the first one seemed risky to him. If Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign used his own power to eliminate that Heavenly Emperor, even if successful, he would dissipate completely due to exhaustion of his energy. Moreover, the time he could gain from obtaining the so-called Sacred Drum technique would undoubtedly be very short, since Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign would not be able to delay the fight with that Heavenly Emperor. No one knew what the evil clan would do in such a short time. Gaining the Sacred Drum technique from Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign under such conditions would be an extremely difficult task. The second method, on the other hand, tested whether he could truly suppress the Heavenly Emperor. Suddenly, Lin Dong seemed to sense something was wrong. This made him snap back to attention. He recalled that whenever Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign mentioned the heavenly artifact, the Sacred Drum, he never referred to the Sacred Drum directly, but instead spoke of the Sacred Drum technique or the Sacred Drum power. What about the Sacred Drum itself? Lin Dong immediately asked, Sacred Drum Heavenly Sovereign, I have been listening to your explanations, but I didn't notice something odd until now. I have a question to ask. Go ahead, Sacred Drum, Heavenly Sovereign replied. I know that the sacred drum itself is a heavenly artifact, but how can I obtain it? Without the sacred drum, even if I have the sacred drum technique and sacred drum power, I wouldn't be able to use them, right? Lindong asked. Heh, I thought it was something serious. Sacred Drum, Heavenly Sovereign smiled upon hearing Lindong's question. He then pointed to the heavens and earth around them and said something that left Lindong and the others utterly shocked. The sacred drum doesn't need to be obtained.